Have you ever heard the phrase, ignore your teeth and they'll go away? That's pretty much the message of life, and we're talking about that next. Hi everyone, Jill from the North Woods, where we talk about how to improve your life one small step at a time. It's always been kind of a joke, but not really a joke. Ignore your teeth and they'll go away. And today I want to take that little phrase and use it as a doorway to something bigger. The idea that your life is not really built by what you add to it, but it's what you stop tending to, what you actually give up on. Here's the idea, and the big idea that I want to talk about is that when we think of our lives as only additive, we add a habit, we add a skill, we add a relationship, we add a goal, and then we stack enough good things in our lives, we'll end up having a good life. But there's a quieter, less comfortable truth that's running underneath all of it. Your life isn't just what you build, it's also what you let go dormant. And some of those things just don't sit there waiting patiently for you to come back. They actually disappear. So teeth are an easy example of them because the consequence of it is physical, undeniable. Skip brushing your teeth, flossing your teeth, skip your checkups, and one day, you're not just a little behind, the tooth is gone. There's no pause button that's there. Neglect has a direction, and the direction is loss. Where I started getting into this, you can see as a pattern for this, is I watched a documentary. And what it was talking about is there's how the brain works. I watch a lot of weird stuff. But essentially, there's a real neurological principle behind all of this that is called use it or lose it plasticity, or the actual technical term is synaptic pruning. Your brain doesn't just strengthen the connections that you use, right? So if you're learning to play piano and then you practice and you practice and you practice, you're building up your brain's synaptic activity so that it can handle more and more complex material faster and faster. But it works in the reverse too. The brain actively prunes the synaptic connections you don't use, that you don't renew. It's not a metaphor. It's literally something that happens in your skull. So I had a personal example land on me and that made me think about it, is I used to love music. Or, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I would go look for CDs and go try to find it. And the way that happened to me is suddenly I got into audiobooks way back when audiobooks came out, probably somewhere in the 90s. And I started listening to more and more audiobooks. They took over more of my time during the day where music used to sit. And then podcasts came out. And then I was listening to podcasts all the time. And at some point, I just stopped listening to music almost entirely. And what gradually started to happen is there's chunks of music appreciation that just went away. And it wasn't because I rejected it. It was because I stopped feeding it. The brain quietly reallocated the space to something else. And so that part was a little bit unsettling to me, that I didn't choose to lose something. It just happened. And as a side effect of choosing something else. And this happens all the time. You'll hear people talk about it. Well, I used to play the flute and I haven't in, 30 years. I don't even think I could anymore. You will start losing that ability because the brain, like I said, prunes away those things you no longer need. And so once I started noticing this, I knew this was a thing. Like I said, this was a low stakes thing as music. I couldn't stop seeing it in higher stake places too. Friendships, if you let them, they'll go quiet because maybe we got busy. The family relationships, maybe they just drifted away. No one was a villain, but it just wasn't something that was tended anymore. Even physical health, when you give up on trying to manage your physical health, which I did for a really long time, one bad decision at a time, and then slowly hundreds of small omissions in my health, and then suddenly my health goes away. It's not the synaptic pruning, but the idea is the same thing there. You ignore your health, it goes away too. So I want to basically look at the framework that I'm offering you today and calling it more of a tending principle. And it has 3 parts to it. 1, neglect is not neutral. we tend to think of, I just don't have time to play the flute anymore. Of not doing something as basically a safe, low risk choice. And it's not. Doing nothing of any particular action is an action in and of itself. It's a direction. That direction almost always begins then to decay and not being preserved. Oh, I'll pick up the flute some other time. I used to knit. I'll just pick it up again when I'm done with it. Nothing you value stays static. Because when you give up on it or you don't feed it, you are actively damaging it. Two, that capacity is finite. So every yes is a quiet no. We've talked about that in podcasts before. That when I pick up an audiobook, it's not like I had a conversation about myself. Well, I really need to give up on music and spend my time doing something else. I just started spending my attention somewhere else, and the music love that was lost was the default action by it. Every new commitment, every new habit, every new relationship, every new hobby, new job is also quietly withdrawing from something else's account. And you may not be told what that is. It just is going to be something else. And you usually find out a little bit later, I really haven't thought about that in a while. I don't even think I could do that. Think about, so I ride my bike. That's fine. But there are people out there who are saying, I don't think I could ride a bike if I wanted to. Or at one point, I got back into running and I worked, with a gym trainer. And so I started running and I said, when did I lose this ability to run? I mean, I literally can't even run anymore. And how do you lose that? How can you possibly lose the ability to run? You ran all the time as a kid. So basically, you may not even realize it's happening until it happens. And the third point is that some losses are recoverable and some aren't. So for example, the teeth example is one not coming back. A friendship that has drifted too long may not come back. My running, when I started running again, it did come back. So a skill of knowing, the difference between something that you can put on hold and get back later, or something that you can put on hold that you may never get back. At least the skill you need to have is being humble enough to understand which one is which. If I ignore this, this friendship, it may just go away. I had this bad habit. So I grew up in the military, right? And in the military, you move a bunch of times and all your friends, they move all the time too. And I got very, very bad at keeping up with people. Luckily, through Facebook, I found most of the people I grew up with and we'd become friends again. But when I left my last job, I got, there was a lot of parent health issues that were going on. And I got super busy. And suddenly I realized, oh no, I'm coming up on my 3rd anniversary at this new job. And there were people I haven't talked to that I promised I would keep up with. That's on me. And am I going to be able to get them back again? I don't know. There are some things you can put off for a while and you can come back to it and it's just fine. So if we look at this category as a few things, I want to say it's more than just the tooth metaphor. The health one is the most literal one. It's not just your teeth that will go away, but if you don't move, you don't exercise, joints will stiffen and you'll get unable to move. Cardiovascular fitness that erodes within, I think it's up to even 3 weeks of use. Cognitive sharpness depends on continual challenges to our brain. The body doesn't wait for permission essentially to start declining. It just responds to whatever you're doing. You work out, you start building muscles. Those little muscle fibers rip and they build bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger again. I think it's biological because you think about it, muscles eat a lot of calories. That's why it's good to have a lot of muscles. But the body is saying, okay, well, if Jill doesn't need those muscles anymore, let's reduce their existence so that Jill can actually function on less calories, which was important in every history part of mankind up to like 50 years ago. Now we have plenty of food. And so you see that pattern where we just put on weight because we no longer have muscles left at all. When I played a video game, we're going to talk about this in a couple episodes from now, where I just sat and would sit there for, 20 hours at a time playing this video game. My health went from being, it's not great, but it's not terrible, to terrible. The body was like, okay, Jill doesn't need these muscles anymore. Let's just give up on them. So essentially, the body responds every day to what you're actually doing. Friendships, like I said, and family bonds run on contact, not on history. You can love someone deeply and still lose the closeness with them, not because you even got in a fight, but just because, we should really catch up. That's what I kept telling myself with the people I used to work with. Oh, I really need to catch up with that person. The relationship doesn't necessarily end. It just thins out very quietly and very slowly, the same way that the music appreciation thinned out for me. And then one day you notice there's a distance and there's a point where maybe you can't bring that relationship back again. Think about skills and identity. You used to be good at a language, an instrument, a craft, some way of thinking under pressure. It depends on use. And I'm not saying this to make you anxious about anything, but when you start lapsing from that thing, you get less good at that thing. So I'm saying that if you stop being surprised, you shouldn't be surprised, I guess, when that happens, and start treating it as information instead of inevitability. Maybe you're ready to give up on something. I think when I was living with my family, my parents, and everything was a crisis, I was ready at the spur of the moment to jump into action, save the day, figure something out, and be very resilient. I notice now that my life is much more quiet. I no longer have those conflicts or those scary situations anymore. And suddenly I've lost a bit of my resilience that I used to have. It's natural because I don't have those battles anymore. And so I'm not set up for the whatever horrible thing is going to happen next the way I used to be when I was a kid. Same thing with faith. Faith is part of your life. Spiritual discipline, prayer, scripture, community, they aren't bank accounts that hold their balance while you're busy doing other things. It's like the music. You stop feeding that connection and the connection doesn't wait. It starts to recede entirely. And so this isn't meant as guilt. It's just more meant to give you an accurate framework of how this mechanism in our brain works. Neglect is a direction and attention is finite. There's only so many things we can pay attention to. And so every yes is a quiet no somewhere else in your life, but some of those things will just go away. So it's just something that you shouldn't be blindsided by. So one small step I can give you in order to tackle this, and it's not really much. It's basically not even a big audit of your life that's overwhelming and something that you'll never quite finish. But instead, take a general picture of your life. When you look at the areas that you put time into, does it represent the kind of life you want to have? Well, I spend this many hours at work, and I spend this many hours with my family, and this many hours with my friends, and I spend this amount of time working out, getting physical exercise, and I spend this amount of time trying to improve my life or make it better. Is the total piece of the pie representative of the kind of life you want to have? So I think it's good to have a good overall evaluation of that. And then the other thing too is you can just pick that up again, pick something up. One relationship, one habit, one skill, one part of your health, one part of your faith life that you have been quietly losing for a little while now because you stopped tending it. You opted out of it. You didn't opt to do it again. And you didn't really reject it. You just gave something else its slot. So you could ask that kind of ideas. What's one thing I could pick back up again? What's really important? Is it the tooth? Is it a friendship or a family relationship? Or is it your physical health? Or is it a habit that used to keep you mentally healthy? In other words, is there something that has crossed to the point where it is on its way out for good? Or is it something that you can actually gain back with a little bit of attention? You often don't know for sure until you try. So this week, try to do the one thing. Send a text to someone you haven't talked to in a while. Do a 10-minute version of a habit that you used to do and now you gave up on. Open a book that you stopped reading, or floss a tooth. Literally floss a tooth. But you don't get your whole life back, I guess, one small step at a time, but you do get information. And what that information is what lets you choose on purpose what you keep instead of finding out later by accident, the way I did, about something you already lost. I already won. Your life is what you build with it, and it's also what you quietly let go with it, too. The good news is that the quiet cuts both ways. Most people have what's drifting hasn't drifted past the point of no return yet. Even me, at a certain age, was able to start running and be able to run again. And I got to the point where I could run. I ran 5 miles on the New Orleans levee. I've been places and gone running, and I got it back again. So you just have to go and check and see where it's at. One small step at a time. Thanks so much. I appreciate you being out there. Jill from the North Woods, and you can find everything I do at jillfromthenorthwoods.com. I just started a Substack. I'm going to try to write articles. Well, I am going to write articles. And it's going to be kind of the behind the scenes of each of these podcasts. Stories, observations from the marsh, a book I read, a movie I saw, some thought I had while I was mowing the lawn, something like that. And so you can find the link to that at my website, jillfromthenorthwoods.com. Appreciate you being out there.